League 0 Round 3, the Red Bull Ring rodeo no one saw coming. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the majestic Austrian hills of the Red Bull Ring, where today, horsepower meets hubris in a glorious display of speed and spontaneity. If you thought League 0 couldn't top the chaos of Monza, you'd be as mistaken as someone trusting their home's Wi-Fi to stream a race. Looking at you, Shaji Zuhan. The pre-race paddock was abuzz with the usual strategic discussions, or it would have been if the drivers weren't busy debating internet connections and housing markets. Antonio Bianchi and Shaji, our resident economists, seemed more concerned with fibre optics and property prices than tyre compounds and braking points. Rumour has it they're launching a new podcast, Fast Cars and Faster Broadband. As the red lights faded, 20 eager drivers launched into action, hurtling towards turn 1, like a pack of greyhounds chasing a particularly juicy rabbit. Adam Merchant, clearly deciding that P3 wasn't his style, blitzed past Elliot Corte for P2 before Elliot had time to say, "What the?" Meanwhile, Antonio Bianchi, perhaps powered by the sheer frustration of his internet service, snatched P4 from Felipe Sarkis. Antonio was on a mission, and nothing, not even a buffering YouTube video, was going to stop him. Lap 1 was less a race and more an audition for the latest action movie. Cameron Dance was weaving through the field with the grace of a ballerina and the subtlety of a bulldozer. From P13, he overtook so many cars, you'd think he was trying to collect them all like Pokemon. Robert Nobles and David Iezzi found themselves relegated to spectators as Cameron danced his way to P11. But not everyone was having such a waltz in the park. Robert Nobles ran into trouble in Sector 1, possibly distracted by thoughts of housing affordability after that riveting pre-race chat. Or maybe he was just overwhelmed by the sheer number of times his mirrors were filled with Cameron's car. As the laps ticked by, the overtakes came thick and fast. On lap 4, Elliot and Antonio exchanged P3 so many times it looked like they were playing a high-speed game of tag. Elliot must have been wondering if his car was fitted with a magnet for Bianchi's front wing. Further back, the mid-pack was a melting pot of ambition and over-ambition. Nick Peterson and Eric Guillory swapped P9 more times than Paul, TX141. Walsh lamented the lack of instant replays. Speaking of which, Paul's broadcast struggles became the stuff of legend. Arturo Mayorga offered help, but perhaps what they really needed was a time machine, or a driver who could avoid incident long enough to warrant a replay. On lap 7, the battle for supremacy reached a boiling point. Adam Merchant decided that following Jaden Calloway was no longer entertaining and breezed past for P1. Jaden, perhaps momentarily distracted by a sudden drop in his internet latency, couldn't retaliate immediately. Cameron Dance, still on his upward trajectory, eyed Shaji Zuhair in P7. Shaji, fresh from his TED Talk on ISP providers, wasn't about to let Cameron through without a fight. The two engaged in a duel that would make gladiators weep, overtaking each other multiple times in a single lap. Somewhere in the chaos, Cameron edged ahead, possibly whispering a thank you to whichever deity watches over late breakers. But just when things seemed to be settling, the pit stops began, a symphony of strategy and, for some, utter confusion. On lap 16, Cameron ran into trouble in Sector 2. Perhaps his tyres were as worn out as the audience listening to Paul explain, yet again, why instant replays were elusive. Or maybe he was pondering the rising cost of Austrian real estate. Pit lane became a hive of activity. Michael Fairchild was in and out so often that one wondered if he was sampling the coffee at each team garage. Given his prior advice on practicing starts, perhaps he was now advocating for practicing pit entries repeatedly. As the race approached its climax, tensions rose. Antonio and Shaji reignited their battle on lap 29 for P5. They swapped positions with the frequency of a dodgy Wi-Fi signal. Each overtake was met with a counterattack, neither willing to concede. It was as if they were racing, not just for position, but for the moral high ground in their ongoing connectivity debate. At the front, Adam Merchant maintained a commanding lead. His drive was a masterclass in precision, smooth, untroubled, and about as thrilling as watching paint dry on a well-built house in a stable market. Behind him, however, all bets were off. Jaden Calloway, despite a hiccup on lap 19 in Sector 2, held on to P2. Perhaps his momentary lapse was due to shock upon realising he'd briefly lost signal with reality, a feeling all too familiar to his fellow drivers. Elliot Corte secured P3, likely mulling over how the race might have gone if he'd managed to keep Merchant behind him at the start. Nonetheless, a podium finish is nothing to scoff at, unless you're in the League Zero Discord, where scoffing is a competitive sport. Felipe Sarkis clawed his way to P4, a redemption arc after running into trouble early on. Some say he took a detour to admire the Styrian countryside, others believe he was searching for a better pit strategy. Either way, he made it work. Nick Peterson finished P7, managing to stay ahead of the roller coaster that was Cameron Dance, who settled for P8. Cameron's race was a tale of highs, lows, and more overtakes than a highway during rush hour. Michael Fairchild rounded out the top 10. Perhaps his pit stop drills paid off, or maybe everyone else just made more mistakes. But let's not dwell on details. As the drivers parked their cars and unstrapped themselves, the post-race chatter began. Discussions floated back to the pressing issues of the day, download speeds and property values. Antonio and Shaji were seen animatedly comparing lap times and latency rates. One can only hope they don't decide to start a real estate agency together. On social media, the fans were relentless. Memes appeared depicting Paul Walsh with a magnifying glass, searching for instant replays. Another showed a car emblazoned with a Wi-Fi symbol, captioned "Signal lost, driver found." In the end, the Red Bull Ring delivered a spectacle that was equal parts thrilling and bewildering. The League Zero drivers proved once again that when it comes to combining speed with unpredictability, they're in a league of their own. So, until the circus rolls into the next venue, remember, keep your foot down, your connection stable, and if all else fails, blame the housing market.